I'm Walt, and this is Delta Astrophotography. In my last video, we photographed the Witch Head Nebula with a Canon 6D with a Radian-61 telescope, but also with a Canon T5i, also known as the 700D, and the 75 to 300mm kit lens. You can see that video in the description below and also at the end of this video. Yesterday, I put out a poll asking which one of the two versions of the Witch Head you would like me to process in this video, and it was unanimous. It's the 75 to 300mm kit lens, so that's what we're processing today. A little bit about this photo before we get started, in case you haven't seen the other video. It was taken with a Canon T5i 700D. My T5i is astro modified, but because there's not a lot of red hydrogen alpha in the Witch Head Nebula, it doesn't matter if my camera's modified or not. There's probably hardly going to be any difference between a stock camera and a astro modified camera on the Witch Head. I used the 75 to 300mm kit lens zoomed in at 100mm, an ISO of 1600, aperture of f5.6, and my shutter speed or exposure time was 120 seconds. I took 102 frames and in the end ended up using 91 of them. I also used darks, flats, and biased for calibration frames. For the software today, we're going to need Deep Sky Stacker to stack everything. We'll need Adobe Photoshop CC. And for plugins in Photoshop, I use one that unfortunately you have to pay for, but it's the most important plugin that I've ever gotten, and I use it in almost all my photos, and it's called GradientXTerminator by RC Astro. I'll leave a link in the description below. You're really going to want to get that one. At some point in the process, I'll have to remove the stars to do a little work on the nebula separately, and I use a free program called Starnet version 2 to do that. But I also use a plugin called StarXTerminator to do it as well. I'll show you the difference between both. One's free, one costs more money. Now, StarXTerminator, the star removal plugin that you have to pay for, it's also made by RC Astro, the guy who did GradientXTerminator. And if you buy GradientXTerminator, then you can get a discount on StarXTerminator. It'll be up to you to decide which one of those star removal programs you want to use. Also, for a little touch-up, I might use something called Vista green, which gets rid of any green in your photos that's not necessary. Okay, I think that about covers it, so let's go ahead and jump into the computer and start processing. One more quick note before we start processing. Please don't feel like you have to do every single thing I do in my workflow. I just hope you learn a few tips and tricks from it. You don't have to follow it exactly. And take your time. If you're learning something new in here, don't try to rush through it. Definitely rewind and go back as many times as possible. That's how you get it in your head. I'm going to try to go as slow as I can for you. All right, let's really get into it this time. Okay, I want to start out by showing you that I have organized all my files into different folders. If you were using something like a computer or ASI Air to take your photos, they might already be labeled properly, but they are not when you're just using a camera and a memory card. So I've got my light frames all in one folder, put all my dark frames in another. Those are the frames I took with the lens cap on, and my flats and bias and so on and so forth. Now, before we begin stacking, the first thing we want to do is open up our light frames folder and look at each individual light frame and make sure there's no huge problem, like something bumped the tripod and make the stars all like zigzag and weird looking, or make sure nobody shined a light down into the camera and just completely ruin that picture. Just kind of go through all your light frames and check for problems. And I've already done that, and I know that all these are fine. If there were any bad ones, I'm pretty sure I just deleted them. Okay, we're going to close out of that, and we're going to open up Deep Sky Stacker. In Deep Sky Stacker, we'll go up here and click Open Picture Files, and we'll select all our light frames. Hit Open. Now we'll click Dark Files, navigate to our Darks folder, and select all of those too. We can do that by clicking the first one, hitting Control A, or Command A probably, and selecting all of these. This photo right here does not belong. Opening those, same with flats. All my flats are selected, and all my bias. Once we've loaded in all our photos, we click Check All, and then Register Checked Pictures. We're going to click Advance and see how many stars Deep Sky Stacker detects in the photos. It's detecting about 500, which is good. If it was detecting a lot more, it's detecting thousands and thousands of stars. There's nothing too wrong with it, except that just takes a very long time to stack if it's detecting thousands of stars. So let's try to move this slider back so we can detect maybe 500 to 800. Yeah, that's fine right there. That won't take nearly as long to stack. Let's click back on actions, and we want to stack about 90% of our files because there might be some files in there that are bad, that have bad stars, maybe a slight haze passed over the stars for a second. It's usually best not to stack 100% of your files. I'm going to do 90. Now let's click recommended settings, and it's going to recommend the settings for your imaging session, and usually they're in red down here, and you click them until they're green. Things like this where it's asking if I'm using narrowband pictures. I did not click on anything because I'm not using narrowband. But let's just kind of briefly look at them. It asked if I'm using a modified DSLR. Yes, but for the Witch Head it doesn't really matter, but because I'm using a modified DSLR, the white balance is really thrown off. Are you using bias frames? Yes, so I clicked that. Told me I'm stacking 102 light frames, and it suggested using Sigma clipping, so I clicked that. I just clicked what it recommended on all of these down here. And finally the bottom one, if color balance in the resulting images is hard to fix in post-processing, use RGB background calibration. Yeah, a lot of times my color balance is hard to process, so I just click that, and it does a lot of things like remove a green color cast and all kinds of other stuff that's kind of hard to correct in Photoshop. So I just went ahead and checked that. I'm gonna hit OK. Now I'm gonna click OK here. And it's telling me I have a total estimated time of 3 hours and 18 minutes on the Witch Head. And that's before it kind of gets rid of some of the bad photographs, since I told it to stack only 90%. So it might be just a little less than 3 hours when it's done, but we're gonna click OK. Now we're just gonna sit here and let it do its thing. All right, Deep Sky Stacker is finished. It said it stacked 91 frames, exposure time 2 hours and 58 minutes, so pretty much 3 hours worth of data. Now it did create an autosave file, but I prefer creating my own save file, so I'm going to click Save Picture to File and choose a folder where I want it to be saved. I have a folder called Final that I have it up here in, and you can see I've already saved it, called Witch Head T5i. But you can call it whatever you want and hit save, and you're done with Deep Sky Stacker. Now we've got the photo opened up here in Photoshop, and it looks much more dark than you would expect it to, but that's okay, that's very normal. So the first thing we need to do is duplicate our background layer down here. We could do that by right-clicking it and click Duplicate Layer, or I usually click Control-J or Command-J on a Mac. There, now that the layer is duplicated, we can start working on it without destroying the original image. First thing we're gonna do is a levels adjustment. You could either go to the top and click Image, Adjustments, Levels, or you can hit Control-L or Command-L on a Mac, and that also brings up levels. Now I'm going to slide the little midtones area right here to the left, right up to the edge of the data spike. I don't want to go too far, I don't want to blow anything out, but kind of right up there to the edge of the data spike there. I'm going to click OK. Now we can see the black background of outer space is a lot brighter than it should be, so let's bring that back down to a more dark color. Let's open up levels again. Either Image, Adjustments, Levels, or Control-L or Command-L on a Mac. And this is our darks or shadows slider right here on the left, and we're going to bring that right up to the edge of the data spike, but not past it. That makes things too black and destroys data we might not ever get back. So let's just bring it kind of right close to the data spike there and hit OK. If you look real close, we can just start to see the Witch Head Nebula coming out right here. There's its nose, its chin, but it's still not nearly bright enough yet. So we're going to do a curve stretch. So we need to create a new layer, and every time we create a new layer from now on out, we're going to hit Control, Alt, Shift, and E. On a Mac, that's Command, Option, Shift, and E. Now before we do a curve stretch and make things brighter, we want to make sure we don't blow out our bright stars and just make stars too big and bloated. So I'm going to create a star mask, so when I start brightening the image, the brightest stars won't be affected, or at least not much. This can kind of seem like a long, confusing process, but I'm going to do it slow. Take your time, always come back to it if you need to remember how to do it. And here we go. I'm going to hit Control-A to select all, might be Command-A on a Mac, and Control-C to copy, maybe Command-C on a Mac, I'm not sure. But that's Control-A, Control-C, select all and copy. Now I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to open up this Add Layer Mask icon. And you can see right here, it's created a layer mask. I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to click the layer mask to actually open the mask up so I can see what's inside. Now I'm going to hit Control-V to paste our image into the layer mask. Now you can see it's pasted a black and white version of our image into the layer mask, and we are going to invert it by hitting Control or Command-I. So now what we've done is everything that's in black will not be affected by our curve stretch, and everything that's white will. I'm going to finish off our mask by going to Filter at the top, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to blur it by about 4 pixels. This blur just keeps things looking natural. Okay, I'm going to click back on our main image, go up to Select, and click Deselect. Now we are ready to do our first curve stretch. You could go up to the top to Image, Adjustments, Curves, or you could hit Control M or Command M on a Mac. Either one brings up curves. I'm just going to click right here, kind of where the data is, and I'm going to pull up. Now you don't want this line at the top to ever become straight, because that means you're clipping data and you'll never get that data back. So let's keep it about right here. I'm going to hit OK. Now the blackness of space is getting a little too bright again, so I'm going to pull up levels again, Control L, and bring the shadows back closer towards the data spike here. There we go. I'm going to hit OK. Now let's create a new layer, Control Alt Shift and E, Command Option Shift and E on a Mac. Now if you're processing my photo along with this tutorial, you're definitely going to start to see on the right hand side of this screen that things are getting brighter than the left hand side of the screen. That's most likely because there was a street light down here and this was very high in the sky, very dark. This is where we're going to use GradientXTerminator to make sure that everything is very even and there's not a bright side of the photo. So I'm going to start by coming over here and clicking the lasso tool. And if you look close, you can actually kind of see the witch head now. It's just going to be very faint, but you can see it. But yeah, anyway, we're going to grab our lasso tool and draw a circle around the witch head and around the star Rigel. Just a small circle around them because those are the main subjects of the photograph. Now I'm going to go to Select and select Inverse, which basically means everything but the witch head is selected now. We're going to go to Filter, RC Astro, and this is when we use GradientXTerminator. Click that, leave the settings at just medium, and hit OK. There, we got rid of that gradient. It's not bright on just one side of the photo now. It's very even throughout. You can go to Select, Deselect to get rid of all these marching ants. I might bring the blacks down a little bit more again, the shadows, so I'm going to hit Control L for levels. Bring that in just a touch. There we go. Let's create a new layer. Control Alt Shift and E. We're going to do one more curve stretch, and I'm going to create another layer mask for that. I'm going to hit Control A for Select All, and Control C to copy. Hopefully that's Command A and Command C on a Mac. I'm going to come down here and click on this Add Layer Mask button. Alt or Option click the layer mask to open it up. Paste our photo in by hitting Control V. Invert it by hitting Control I. And bring up levels, Control L. Bring the shadows up and the whites down over here on the left. Almost done with our star mask. Let's hit Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and just leave it around 4 pixels. All right, our star mask is created. Let's click back on our actual image now. Let's go ahead and get rid of these marching ants. Select at the top and hit Deselect. All right, let's do another curve stretch. Remember, curves is either Image, Adjustments, Curves, or Control or Command M. This time, instead of just dragging this up right here like that, we're going to select this little finger pointing tool, and it's going to give us an eyedropper. I'm going to kind of click right on the witch head, hold, and drag up. There we go. Now we don't want to pull it up too much. We're already starting to maybe overstretch and bring too many stars out. So about here is going to be fine. I'm going to select OK, bring up levels, Control L. Bring in the darks just a little bit more. There we go. Hit OK. Now let's create a new layer. Control Alt Shift and E. Now as you can see, the stars are getting out of control. Yes, I've kind of contained some of the bigger stars to keep them from getting too bloated and blown out, but all the small tiny stars in the background are starting to come forward now. So we just got stars upon stars, and you can't really see what's going on in this photo anymore. So this is the point where we remove the stars and process our nebula and our stars separately. There's 2 different ways to do that. One is free and one is not, but better. I'll show you the free one first and then the other method second. First, let's go with the free method. It's called Starnet version 2. So what we're gonna do is right here, we're gonna save a copy of this image. File, save a copy. I'm gonna create a folder in here called Starnet for YouTube. And in that folder, I will save a copy of this image. I need it to be saved as a TIFF file, and layers need to be turned off. We don't need to save all the layers. Turn layers off. We're gonna turn on this ICC profile and hit save. Now let's check out Starnet version 2. Okay, once you get Starnet downloaded on your Windows computer, it's gonna be located on a folder. It's up to you where you save that folder, but mine's on my desktop. And inside the folder, you see all this, but the only one that really matters is Starnet GUI, Graphical User Interface. And let's just double click that. Input file, browse, is just asking me for that copy of our image that we just saved. So we'll browse and look for that. Look in my Starnet for YouTube folder, there it is. Hit open. And for output, all we need to do is rename it. I'm just going to add the word Starless to the name and hit run. This should come up and it should take just a few minutes. So go ahead and get yourself a cup of coffee or tea. Okay, it's finished. It took about 2 or 3 minutes. Could take a lot longer depending on how fast and old your computer is. From here, we need to just go back to Photoshop where we're working on our project. And let's go to the top and hit File, Open. And let's find the folder we just saved our Starless image in. Starnet for YouTube. All right, here's the one that says Starless, the one that Starnet just created. I'm gonna hit Open. And here's our Starless image. Let's put it back in the project we were just working on by hitting Control A for select all and Control C for copy. Hopefully that's Command A and Command C on a Mac. Go back to the project we were working on and paste it in there by hitting Control V. And there it is on top of our layers list now. I can turn it off and see the image with stars we were working on, turn it on and see just the Starless version. I'm gonna double click it and rename it Starless. Now there are 2 things I don't like about using Starnet. One is that you have to go outside of Photoshop and do something with a second program. And the way you have to copy and paste the image back in is kind of annoying. But second, if you look right here at where the star Rigel used to be, it's still left the halo and all the diffraction spikes. That looks ugly and you might have to get rid of it by coming up here to this healing brush tool. I'm gonna right click it and make sure it's, healing brush tool. I'm gonna adjust the brush size of it with the bracket keys. And I'm gonna Alt click somewhere near it and then click on it. And that could look bad, that could look good, just depending on how clean your background is. I'm gonna go over that again in case I went too fast, but I find my healing brush tool, it looks like a Band-Aid. Might have to right click it to get the healing brush tool instead of the spot healing brush tool, but I click it. I can change my brush size with the bracket keys. You could also change it right here. I'm gonna make sure it's big enough to cover that whole little spot there. I'm gonna hold Alt and click somewhere nearby where it's nice and clean looking. Then I'm gonna come back over here and click right on top of that area. And it did a pretty decent job cleaning that up this time. It doesn't always do that. But now let me show you another way to remove stars that I think is superior. Let's go ahead and just get rid of this Starnet Starless version for now. Just gonna move it down here to the bottom. Okay, we're back to that point where we needed to make the image starless again. So let's try this method. I've got StarXTerminator by RC Astro installed. So I'm gonna go to Filter, RC Astro, StarXTerminator, and I'm going to hit OK. Yeah, it's that easy. We're just gonna wait for about 2 minutes for this to finish up. And now StarXTerminator is done, and as you can see, it also got rid of the halo and diffraction spikes. It removed the stars and got rid of that horrible artifact in one step where it took me multiple steps in Starnet version 2. And that's why I swear by StarXTerminator version 2. I'll link to both star removal programs in the description below. Just like I did with Starnet, I'm going to double click my Starless layer and name it Starless. Now I'm going to turn it off and come back down to the layer below me. And I'm just gonna create another copy of that by hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E. So now we've got our Starless layer and our regular layer right below it. While the Starless layer is turned off and I have the regular layer selected, I'm going to make a stars only image. So let's go up to Image, Apply Image, And then layer, I'm going to select my starless layer. And with blending, I'm going to select subtract. That means I'm subtracting the starless layer, which is the Witch Head Nebula, from the picture with stars. So that leaves me with just a stars only image. I'm going to leave my offset at 2. Click OK. So now we've got our stars only image, and we can see so many stars in there. Now it's the time to kind of shrink them back down and get them to kind of like they were towards the beginning of this editing process. We're going to go to select and then color range. Right here in this little drop down box, let's select highlights, and we're going to turn our fuzziness up and our range down until we see lots of stars in our little preview window down here. And I'm going to hit OK. Now there's a few bright stars in here that I don't really want to shrink. So to keep that from happening, let's click the lasso tool and hold Alt or Option maybe, and draw circles around some of these brighter stars. That'll keep them from being shrunk. These are the stars that you see with your naked eye, so I want them to be nice and big and bright. You can just do this to taste. I'm not going to do this to Rigel though, because Rigel is a little too big. We'll let that shrink just a touch. All right, now let's complete the star shrinking process by going to Select, Modify, Expand. I'm going to expand our selection by 2 pixels, just making sure the whole star is selected, and select, modify, feather, to make sure there aren't any hard edges or weird transitions and it looks very natural. I'm going to feather it by 1. Now I'm going to go to Filter, Other, Minimum. Since there were so many stars, we're going to keep the pixels at between 1 and 1.5. I think 1.4 should be okay. I'm going to hit OK. All right, I just shrunk the stars. Let's go to Select at the top and hit Deselect. That looks so much better. There's still tons of stars, but they're not just dominating the entire image. I'll double click that layer we just worked on and call it Stars Only. Now let's click back on our starless layer and turn it back on right here. And let's work on that. Let's create another copy of it, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now, if your computer starts getting slow and bogged down by all these layers, you can always merge a few. Like, let's go down below stars only. You want to keep stars only, you want to keep starless, you want to keep that top layer, so you don't want to flatten it because it would get rid of all that stuff. Flattening is when it takes all your layers and combines them down into one. You don't want to do that. You really want to keep your stars only and your starless layers. So we take the one right below stars only, hold Shift, and click the last one. Right click, click Merge Layers. I don't necessarily recommend doing this because then you can't go back and mess with other layers, but if your computer can't handle all those layers, that's one way to get around it. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go to Window, History, and throw the merge layers in the trash. Okay, so we've got our new starless layer on top, and let's work with that for a little while. I'm gonna do another curves adjustment, Control M, or Image Adjustments, Curves. Once again, I'm gonna click on this little finger here, click in the witch head's face, click, hold, and drag up. Hit OK, but I'm gonna bring up Levels, Control L, or Image Adjustments, Levels. I'm gonna bring this over to the data spike, right over here. Not too much though. I do not want a lot of this background dust to get lost. There we go. I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna create a new layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. I really wanna bring out the witch's face a lot, more so than some of this background. If I would have gotten a few more hours of data, I probably could have gotten some more of this background and it would look nice and sharp, but right now it's just kind of barely coming through. My main focus is on the witch's face at this very moment, so let's brighten just the witch's face. Let's go to Select, Color Range, and at this drop box right here, I'm going to choose Sampled Colors this time. It gives me a little dropper, and I'm going to click the witch's face. Now I'll just mess with my fuzziness till I see the witch's head and a few other things selected, but mainly just the witch's head. I'm gonna hit OK. Now we can see the witch's head is selected, but also some of this crap down here where Rigel used to be. I'll show you how to get rid of that in just a second. Let's refine our selection by going to Select, Select and Mask, and just turning the feather up to about 10 or so. This keeps our transitions natural looking. Okay, I'm gonna hit okay. Now here's where I do some things that are a little different. I'm gonna come down here and click Add Layer Mask. And just like we did when we were creating a star mask, I'm gonna hold Alt and click the layer mask so I can open it up and see what I'm looking at. Now everything that's more white is going to get brighter when I use a curves adjustment in just a few minutes, and everything's dark is gonna be less affected. But I want more separation between light and dark. So I'm gonna bring up levels, Control L or Image Adjustments Levels. I'm gonna slide the shadows over to the right until everything gets very black except for the witch's face. About here is looking good. Now, I don't like all this Rigel stuff being selected too, so I'm gonna click my brush tool right here. Make sure this right here is set to black. It could either be white or black, but we want black. And I'm gonna paint out Rigel. I don't want that to get any brighter than it already is. There we go. And just like we did with our star mask, we wanna blur it a little bit, so we'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, but this time we're gonna go a little heavier than 4 pixels. I'm gonna jump it up to about 60. There we go, hit okay. All right, there's our witch mask. Let's click back on our main image, bring up curves, which is Control M, Command M, or Image Adjustments, Curves. Once again, I'm gonna click the little finger icon. It's gonna give me a dropper. I'll click in the witch's face, click, hold, and pull up. Now you can see the only thing that's really getting brighter is the witch's face. Don't want to go too heavy with it because that looks awful. But just a little bit, make it a little bit brighter than everything else. That looks good to me. Hit OK. Create a new layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now's the point where I start using a lot of camera raw filter adjustments. These are some overall adjustments, so let's go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. First thing we're gonna do is click the basic tab at the top, and I'm gonna bring the overall exposure up just a little bit. Increase the contrast just a touch. Bring down the blacks just a touch. Just a touch. Increase clarity just a touch. Let's kind of zoom in on the witch so we can see kind of what we're doing. Zoom back out. I'm literally left clicking and moving my mouse left and right to zoom in and out in this view. And let's come down here to the detail tab, and this is where we'll do some noise reduction. Zoom in a little bit, increase the color noise reduction and the noise reduction overall. Get it kind of smooth looking, there we go. See, I'm pulling the noise reduction all the way up to 40 or 50 to smooth it out. That might be too much. You're gonna lose some detail in there if you bring it up too much. So this first time around, we're gonna bring it up to about 30. And that looks pretty good. Let's bring up the sharpening just a touch. I think I'm gonna go back to basic and bring up the vibrance and saturation just a touch as well. Let's bring out some nice colors in here. I did use an Astro modified camera, so if you see a little red in here, that's because of that. But the Witch Head itself, you do not need an Astro modified camera. I'm gonna hit OK. Let's look at before and after the camera raw filter. So that's looking cool. Let's create another new layer, Control, Alt, Shift, and E, and we're gonna go back to camera raw filter and make just a few more adjustments. Filter, camera raw filter. Just one more mild exposure bump, very mild. Contrast, just touch, blacks down a touch more clarity, touch more violence. You can see I'm barely moving these sliders. It could be very easy to overdo it. Detail, let's kind of zoom in a little bit so we can see the detail. Just a little bit more noise reduction here. Sharpening, just up a touch. I'm gonna hit OK. All right, we're almost done at this point. I'm gonna hit Control, Alt, Shift, and E. Now let's go down here in our layers menu and find the stars only image, click it and drag it to the very top. We're gonna bring the stars back. So let's put our stars only layer at the top. And right here where it says normal, we're gonna select that drop down box and select screen. And we've got our stars back. A lot of times when I select screen, it has this blue area highlighted around the word screen, and it won't let me create a new layer until I hit the escape button. See, it just turned that blue off. Now I can create a new layer by hitting Control, Alt, Shift, and E. And let's bring up levels because you can see it looks a little hazy. Hit Control L. Once again, bring my shadows closer towards the data spike, not too much. See, that just gets rid of a lot of that dust and stuff. I don't like that, so let's bring it in just a touch. Hit OK. We're gonna go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Once again, I'll bring up the exposure just a touch and contrast. And this time I'm gonna use the dehaze slider just a little bit. There we go. Touch more clarity. Zoom in. Go to detail, touch more noise reduction. There we go. And I'm gonna hit OK. Now that I'm looking at it towards the end, I do see a little bit of green here in the photo. I kind of like it, but if you don't, you're not into green, I'll show you how to get rid of that too. Create a new layer, Control Alt Shift and E. And the plugin that I mentioned before, Hasta Vista Green. I'm gonna go to Filter, Deep Sky Colors. There it is. Just gonna keep it as medium and hit OK. I got rid of any green that was here in the photo. At this point, I think we're done with most of the editing, and we can spend a little time cropping now. I'm gonna come here and click my crop tool. Just make sure I get the edges cropped, because there's probably, yeah, you can see down here, there's just a little bit of stacking artifacts. Just crop that in a little. And hit OK, or Enter. Another thing we can do is, if you don't like this angle, we can go to Image at the top, Image Rotation, and I can rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Now I have a portrait version of the Witch Head Nebula. This may not look very good full screened on YouTube, but this would look great on your social media. I'm gonna create a new layer, Control Alt Shift and E, and just for the heck of it, let's go into Camera Raw Filter one more time. This is just me going crazy at this point. Touch more exposure, touch more contrast, touch more clarity, touch more vibrance, and a touch more noise reduction. All right, I'm very happy with the way this turned out. I'm gonna hit OK and we're done. All right, guys, that about does it for this one. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for hanging in there. If you learned anything new, let me know down in the comments. And if you liked the video, leave me a like. And give me a subscribe, because there's all kinds of new stuff coming out very soon, including a full ASIR tutorial and lots of things to photograph in the constellation Orion. So stay tuned for all of that. And as always, everybody, stay spacey, clear skies, and we'll see you next time.